Good morning, everybody. I'd like to call the executive committee to order. Roll call, please.
Mr. Samuelson.
Here.
Mr. Benson.
Here.
Mrs. Labuda.
Here.
Ms. Vedder. Mr. Ruiz. Mrs. Geiger. Mrs. Edwards. Here. Mr. Steingart.
Here.
Mr. Sorensen.
Here.
It's not snowing.
No more snow.
Okay.
No,
Can't
We
babysit
ready to go?
everybody.
I apologize.
That's okay. Josh, anything? Okay. Sam, do you have anything for us? No report today? We have no presentation. We have a single vacancy to look at. It is from the Adult Care Center. County Sheriff, 1650. It was vacated on September 25th, 13. Any question? Randy is here, I see. Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, we have to continue to serve food, so.
Okay.
I guess they need a position, thank you.
All in favor? Okay, no opposed, thank you.
6-0.
Okay, so we'll move on to the resolutions. Number 1, appoint Joshua Potosek as the Sullivan County Manager.
Move it.
Wow. Jean and Kathy, any discussion? All in favor?
We've had enough discussion.
Any opposed? Okay, great. Number 2,
6-0.
authorize the issuance of an RFP to provide professional and technical services to develop a pipeline of actionable projects and overall comprehensive planning. Okay, second, Cora.
Alan.
Okay,
Cora.
any discussion? Cora?
I don't know if anybody got I don't know whether it was 2 minutes before 5 or 2 minutes after 5, email with my question. Kathy got my question about, in this context, the difference between an RFP and an RFQ and specific language in the resolution
Ruiz.
regarding the funding sources.
It's an RFP, we put it out not as a request for
But
quotation.
can you explain the difference as to why, in this context, an RFP is better than RFQ?
The timing.
Timing's
Timing.
everything.
Because if we did the RFQ, then we'd have to pull it all back and then do an RFP.
Anyway, so we're
Anyway.
cutting it from 2 steps to 1 step.
Right.
I did provide language just this morning.
I got it out to everybody already.
Oh, okay, so Kathy sent it out as a draft. The purpose of this is to provide assistance for the planning division, help with both the ongoing administration of current grant contracts, as well as to help the division and the legislature develop a series of pipeline projects for the next consolidated funding round. So,
But it wasn't just the CFA, we were also wanting federal sources, not just
we also
state.
say in the language that I put together this morning says CFA and other state and federal funding sources that may be applicable to the county's community and economic development agencies.
The reason why I'm stuck on this point, and it's really a deal breaker for me if it's not the language of the final resolution, is because with the previous round when we did the economic development plan, I don't think that specific language was in, and I thought that was gonna be a specific deliverable that we were asking for the previous outside consulting firm to do. And we all know that we actually did better getting state funding before we were part of the Mid-Hudson Regional Economic Development Council. The numbers show that. And therefore, I wanna make sure that there is a deliverable as to those, federal and state funding sources in any plan. Do you have anything to say about that, Jill?
I haven't looked at this RFP, Kathy just sent it, so I just pulled it up on my phone, but, to me, what's crucial is this grant calendar and the grants administration. If a consultant wants to come on board, how are we gonna move forward with getting those grants ready, being on top of them?
So
That's what I would say. I don't know if that's in here, I apologize, but
Yeah.
to me, that's critical and would be if that was helpful. But again, I can't speak much to it, because I don't know what it is.
Anything else, Alan?
I would say that, if, once the consultant is selected, it's this legislative body through planning committee on a monthly basis, should be getting reports reports and providing input into the process. Because at the end of the day, it'll be the legislative body that selects those projects which it feels are the priorities that it should see funding for. And the things I always look at are, the projects that are going to advance our community and economic development goals and objectives, but also those projects that have a snowball's chance of being funded. To be perfectly honest, so they got to be good. We can't just throw projects out there. We have to assess whether they're strong likelihood of being funded, and put our resources, to picking those applications that would be strong, and bring those dollars back to the county.
Do we know where we are with that calendar? Is it in some sort of?
We
We started, staff, before this came up, staff was intending to have that presentation and planning next in January.
Okay.
So we had started, it's not complete, but we have had a couple initial meetings to start the process.
Okay, well, like I said, that specific language is a deal breaker for me, because I'm not voting for it.
Okay,
Or
any,
I think you should just give us the specific language. I don't see an
I can
objection.
send you a draft of what,
Yeah.
Jonathan?
I can just bring it back to the office.
Thank you.
So basically, the predominant activity then is gonna be helping regional project focus.
Veteran.
Ancillary, help the department if there's other things they can do, that's the goal?
Yes, and then, I guess, in addition to that, also, working with division staff and with Josh to look at the current structure of the division, and, provide feedback on the current structure, whether it makes a lot of sense as we move forward, or if there are things they might recommend that we do slightly differently in the organizational structure of the division as we move forward.
So ultimately, you're basically gonna buy a bank of hours, because if you're basically gonna hire a consulting firm with somewhat open-ended, more objective-based than project-based, so we're gonna buy whatever they come back with, we're gonna allocate X dollars for X hours, and try to have it all come together. I don't have a problem, and I think, certainly between Josh and Janet and folks, they can certainly write an RFP to accomplish the goals, and all we're really doing is voting to issue an RFP.
Yes.
Okay, any other questions or comments on this resolution? I do have a question. Is this for for how long would we be hiring this firm for? There is no time frame on this? In the resolution, there's no time frame on it, so.
There's not a time frame. I think as Jonathan pointed out, I think we should go into it with an initial commitment of hours or dollar amount, and then from there assess, whether that. I think part of it's going to be affected by how quickly the vacancies in planning are filled, how quickly everyone gets up to speed. But I would anticipate an initial term of 6 months, because I think we're probably about 4 to 5 months out from the next CFA. So, and I think once they identify projects, I would see some role for the consultant to work with staff to develop those applications too.
Okay. Any further questions or comment?
I'm wondering why we're doing an RFP instead of an RFQ.
We already did that when you weren't here. But
Kathy?
quickly, it's to take a step out rather than do an RFQ and then do an RFP. We're just moving it to one step of doing the RFP.
So the RFP will include qualifications
Okay.
as well as the
So we're
proposal.
not going to be taking just because it's the lowest bid?
No, we always look at lowest qualified, and within the
Most
RFP
qualified.
process,
There's other criteria.
The RFP is flexibility. You don't have to, if you were to issue a bid, you have to take the lowest responsible bidder. But on an RFP, you have flexibility to negotiate. If you feel a vendor is more qualified, but they're a little bit more expensive, you can choose them.
Okay, I just wanted to be
Even in
clear
a
on
bid
that.
situation, a term
Yeah.
responsibility
Yes.
gives you that wiggle room as well.
This is who best meets the needs of the project.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
Sorry.
I'd like to call the question. All in favor? Any opposed?
Exit.
Thank you. Number 3 is to authorize a new agreement with ML Zager PC for collection purposes. Motion?
Move it.
Kathy.
Second?
Cora.
Cora? Okay. Any discussion, questions? I see that Joe Laughlin is here, if we have any questions for him at this point.
Should I go over my list of questions?
Sure.
I would,
Okay,
if I were
so,
you.
these, I think were initially brought up a couple of weeks ago, when was that?
Needs to
That we had
stand
a
up though
caucus?
when he's answering.
And
He
then,
needs to stand up
I
unless he talks
followed up
loud
with
on it.
more questions, I'm directing this to Cheryl.
I don't recall when your caucus was, but it
But
has
you
to be.
recall when they came in, and these are the same questions I asked them, and then I asked for a follow-up on the 13th, that's the email chain. I'm just gonna go through them. Okay,
I responded to you last night.
right.
Okay.
Okay.
And I
So-
think Randy also responded.
Right, that came in just recently.
Okay, so the first question, just so that, my understanding of what, experience the firm has, is that we initially, said that we were, this is within the context of, you know, our general movement
I'm going out
has
to lunch
been
after this
to,
meeting.
have as much in-house
eating
work
lunch.
done
Damn
and
right you are.
contract out when we can't get it done within
Better be
the
a good one.
employee thing. So this all started, in my understanding, when the solid waste, fee, no.
The
Okay, so then my
Zager
understanding
firm
is
has
wrong.
been with, no, the Zager firm has been doing collection work for the county. I don't know how long actually the Zager firm has been doing it, but I understand the last agreement was in
Yeah.
2005. But they have undertaken, I don't need to speak for Joe, but they've undertaken collection work on
Cheryl,
behalf of the.
excuse me, I'm sorry, you're not being picked up by the mics. Could you either come to the table or move, speak louder, however you wanna do it? If you guys want to
Taking Joe
grab these
with me.
chairs, okay. Oh, you-
I'm not going in alone.
You're bringing your own attorney, are you?
Oh, no. I've learned a few things over the years.
Yeah, Joe, come grab a seat over here, it's fine.
I got one word of
I wanna
advice
have
for you,
shout.
Kevlar.
I want to have to shout my question. Thanks.
Okay, so just to be clear, I don't know how long the Zager firm has been doing collection work for the county, but I understand that the latest agreement was from 2005. So this did not arise as a result of the hauler issue this past year.
Okay.
They've been with us for quite a while.
So that 2005 agreement is what you're hoping to update?
It's just it's an older agreement, and we thought it should probably be looked at. And also, given the conversations that I held with Jill, with Ed, and with Randy, it appears that there is a need for a lot of collection work.
Okay,
That's not specifically addressed in the 2005 agreement.
okay.
So that's what led us to ask for.
So
the
is there
update.
an itemized list, because you gave me the $157,000 figure when we were in the office of what, had been looked at with, that was just one portion, that was the DPW portion, right? Do we have a list anywhere that shows DPW and planning and BFS all together on one list, on one page that says, this is how much the collection agency would be looking at?
I don't wanna answer you incorrectly. My understanding is, if you look at the account activity on the Public Works, weekly account activity report, it changes. But, we dealt with the two larger haulers. I understand, and the commissioner can speak about, he's sending out letters asking that all accounts be paid by the end of the year. And then there'll be a balance. And he'll decide whether he needs us to get involved or he needs the firm to get involved. That's Public Works. Planning, it was just the one or two loans that defaulted, and we got judgments. I got judgments out of the county attorney's office. We turned it over to the Zager firm for collection work. Social services, I can't speak, Randy can probably speak better about the adult care center, but my understanding is the adult care center has been using the Zager firm for years.
Yes.
And there's been success to the extent that they've been involved. The other portion of social services is, from what I recollect meeting with Randy, is there's a lot of money out there that if we can try to get some of it back, either on behalf of the county or on behalf of the state or the feds, we would be doing our due diligence and perhaps getting some of this money back into the county.
And that's because the currently the, social services department doesn't have the expertise in-house, is that why we would
I
go
would
to an
say.
outside agency, Randy?
Yeah, I think, especially in these repayment agreements that we have, we can go back 10 years to collect on the repayment agreements. Just our initial tally, there's over 3,700 repayment agreements, and the dollar amount was around $4 million. So it's really, I mean, a firm that specializes in collections and repayment and seizure of assets, what have you, is gonna do that a lot quicker.
Okay, and this is the norm, this is standard operating practice throughout New York State, to go
I mean,
to outside
It's
collection
in social
agencies?
services law to be able to recollect that money really by any means that you can do it. But, so
I see.
some of it is cleaning up and going back and getting current, and then moving forward, being able to absorb it internally.
I don't know what that means.
Well, if you can clean up the 3,700 outstanding cases, and then as we move forward and enter into subsequent repayment agreements, we'll be able to handle that, because we won't
Okay,
have
we're trying to
that
get at the
tremendous
backlog
volume.
is what we're
Yeah,
saying.
the backlog.
Okay, Kitty?
Okay, it appears to me that there seems to be an ongoing problem with the county with collections. So I think it's great that we're going to be collecting the money. I'm wondering whether or not it would be worthwhile, is there a time limit on this? Is there an end date to this? Because I'm wondering if it would be worthwhile to, perhaps put somebody else in legal who would be dealing only with
Geiger in.
collections, since we have an ongoing issue with collections apparently for many years. I don't know where the cost ratio is here versus what they get versus having somebody who is devoted to that.
There is a Fair Debt Collection Act. Joe, I'm sure you're incredibly familiar with it. I'm not that familiar with it. I did collection work early in my career. There are specific requirements. I'm not even sure that and Sam, I don't know, a county attorney can do some collection work. We could probably do
Geiger
some
out.
collection work, but I'm not convinced we can do all collection work legally. I just don't know the answer to that. Yeah, I guess if you could have someone who can make phone calls and people will pay up,
I think
certainly
you also
cost
need the
effective.
infrastructure other than just the attorney. I mean,
Well, that's right.
Investigation.
there's investigative staff,
Whole office.
paralegal staff, clerks, et cetera, that.
All right, I mean, that's a piece that, you know, because if it's an attorney piece, it might be
Hold on,
worth
Jean, hold on.
having
Yeah.
it in-house if we're doing this year after year after year. It's an ongoing debt that we're dealing with.
Okay, Jonathan?
I mean, I think we gotta make sure we're
Geiger back
separating
in.
the collection versus the getting a judgment. I think we do a very fair job of getting agreements and judgments in place. It's the enforcement and collection of that judgment that firms like Zager are more able to collect on that judgment. So we're not paying them to go get a judgment against somebody, and if they pay, great, they don't. It's about enforcing judgments that our staff gets in place, and they've got the tools and expertise to find the money. So it's a two-step, just make in your head, it's a two-step process. You get your judgment, now you gotta go collect it.
Okay, Jean?
Question we should be asking is not of us. We should be asking Commissioner Parker if he's happy with the way things are going now with this company. If he's happy with that, we should be happy with that. Let him do his job.
No pressure.
And I will remind Cheryl that I didn't really wanna get involved in this discussion, but.
You reminded me in an email earlier, but
Okay.
it isn't,
But
it's
I-
helping your
It comes with the
division.
title, I'm sorry.
With the,
It
with
does.
the resolution, what I would like some direction on is, I mean, it's a resolution to enter into a contract or an agreement. There's a pre-existing, freestanding agreement back to '05. There are some provisions in that, such as the percentages, and then, decision-making at time of settlement, et cetera, that I would like feedback from the legislature in terms of the percentages, and then their thoughts on the ability when you get into settlement. I can't remember the exact provisions, but there was, if you got to 85% of an agreed upon amount, then I think the firm had, you know, the final say, but there are some logistical things that I wouldn't wanna get the resolution necessarily saying go forward and get into a contract, and then we get into discussions without kinda knowing what your thoughts are about percentages and final sign-off.
And
Well,
I
that
did-
gets me to question number 2.
And I did mention to Randy, I don't know if you got the email, before the meeting. In caucus, the proposal was shared with the percentages. I didn't know if anyone had shared that with Randy, but the firm did address it, those percentages. It's not 33% across the board. And and we did take into account the, issues you raised in your conversation with me earlier, and we did speak to Jacob and Joe about being more involved, not giving them the ability to go ahead and settle without
Who's the them?
the firm,
Okay.
to settle cases without input from the county attorney's office. There can be a threshold.
I mean, I'll give you an example. There's a current settlement going on, and there's $100,000 there, right? And so the person who we're getting the money from may throw a number out to us that to settle. And, you know, just within, you know, who gets that final say in that situation? Does it go to the firm for the final say, or does it go to the commissioner, legislature, et cetera? How you would want that to look in a contract?
Yeah, I don't have enough information to make a decision on that.
I often don't either, but we have.
So we've gotta start somewhere to get that right information. Well, part of the reason why is, I'll just read out the second question that I wrote, was the fee structure, the 33% of collections obtained. So I asked what happens in the case of social services where the collections returned go to the feds or the state, and what the county share is included in this rate. So that gets back to your thing, is who makes that determination? Is it the law firm, is it the?
No, I mean, that, you're asking about the reimbursement, right? I mean, we say there was $100,000, and then there's a determination as to what the firm's percentage is if they were to collect $100,000.
Which is what you're
then-
saying is a different issue as to who, the previous question is, whose role is it, who's responsible under this retainer agreement to go?
To make the final decision on the dollar amount accepted.
Okay, so, and that's what
That's
gets to
one
this
decision.
percentage?
That's
Okay.
one decision,
Right.
okay? And then of that dollar amount accepted, you know, what percentage would the firm get of the dollar amount accepted? That's a second decision point.
And the third question would be of that dollar amount, how much does the county
Right.
actually get?
Right.
Since we're paying the firm, the feds and the state is not.
Right, and that depends on the program for DFS from what we're getting the repayment from. Say, if it was, we have many safety net repayment agreements, and safety net, you're all aware that 71% of the expenditure is local share. So if we were to recoup on safety net cases, 71% of that money is going to return to the county. On Medicaid, with elderly who pass away, where there may be an asset, there may be property, that property then gets sold and funds get paid to DFS. Typically, that money all goes to New York State. So right now, what we have are DFS attorneys who are partially county funded doing that work, but yet all the money goes to the state. If we were to use the firm and on these Medicaid cases, then they're going to take their percentage from the proceeds and then return the money to the state. So there's gonna be no local cost in using, and there's probably 10 or 12 of those a year that right now take up DFS legal time with a local share attached, but we don't see any of the proceeds. So by using an independent firm, using the state's Medicaid dollars to pay them, and returning the rest, it's.
You say,
I'm sorry, there'd be no local cost or there'd be no local benefit?
both.
Well, there's be, if I may, the
chuckling
cost would be
about the
nothing,
cake.
The
but
cost
the,
would be nothing, the benefit would, there is a benefit in
that he has his
we're
employees
fulfilling.
doing work instead of going after collection work, they'd actually be able to do more substantive work.
Okay, so even though we're collecting on Medicaid, which would go to the state and the feds, we wouldn't be getting any dollars out of that, but we'd be saving
She knows, even
money.
he knows.
You know, we may end up getting, it gets complicated with the burials, if it's an indigent burial, and we're paying for burial, we may be able to take some of that money, to offset the local burial cost, but say it's $100,000 and it was a Medicaid repayment, that's all going back to New York State. And I think legislatively, that's an issue, there's a local, you know, my issue with that is there's a local Medicaid share, $20 million a year, but when we recover money at a minimum, we keep 10% of what we recover. If the answer is no, it all has to go back to the state. So, you know, you're paying 10% of the bill, but when you're collecting, you're not able to keep 10% of that.
Well, that was what I was getting at with the question that I had here.
But by
When you're
using the
dealing-
outside firm, you are
Yeah.
being able to access that state, that money that otherwise would go back to the state to pay for the attorney function, rather than using local attorneys with local costs associated to do the function.
So in your mind, the retainer agreement would need to spell out whose responsibility it is and when. At what point it's within the in-house,
The
in-county.
one issue is the settlement, who has the final say on the settlement amount. Okay, I mean, to me, that's a significant issue, that's one. The other one is the percentage, and then is the percentage based on the total amount received? I mean, I think it sounds like there were different things discussed, that I haven't seen yet. And then, you know, some definition around as to what we will send to them. You know, and then the process associated with that, how that would work, if we were to send them 100 cases, you know, how that works.
Because to me, what I see in terms of this overall retainer agreement, that it's pretty simple when you're just dealing with the solid waste and it's just 100% of the county share, that 67% of 1.2 million or whatever that amount is better than 0% of nothing.
Right.
So, you know, when it comes to the county share, it's pretty straightforward. But when it comes to different rates for different services, I think it starts to get complicated, especially if it's not clear who's responsible for the amount at what point. And I don't know how,
Well, I mean, if you look at it, some of the work is going to be for the firm. I would see it as low risk and the potential for high reward, because there's something out there and they're going to be able to access it for us. It may or may not be very labor intensive, but there's a dollar amount there that they're going to get.
and the other point.
Whereas
yeah.
other cases that we give them may be high risk on their part, because they may put a ton of time into it, but there's nothing there to bring back in. But
Right.
yet they have a significant amount of time and effort into that case.
And that's, I think, what Jake brought up at the meeting, was that you win some, you lose some, and hopefully it's gonna average out that everybody is able to pay their bills. The other issue that was brought up in the caucus was kind of this bell curve, where because of the backlog for however many years it's been, you're gonna be needing this upfront, right? Because,
Right,
and
and then
then at
it'll-
some point, yeah.
It'll diminish slowly.
So that, I think, is another issue that, you know, if a retainer agreement hasn't been, looked at in 6 years, 7 years, 8 years, then it should be something that either is looked at the end of 1 year after you've had enough time to get your feet wet and say, well, this worked, this didn't work, we need, you know, so that we don't have something out to infinity and beyond.
So that begs the question, is there a sunset on this?
Just stop sending them cases.
Yeah, I think this is
No, I
under
mean,
the
if
direction
you
of the
have a
commissioner.
sorry?
I'm sorry.
Wouldn't it be an annual contract that gets renewed with other contracts? Is that?
I'm wondering if that's what the plan is.
Whatever you want.
could be a 3-year, it could be a 1-year, it could be a 5-year, whatever we decide. That's the
Well,
length of the
we're getting
contract.
into some
And that would
territory
be
is
the-
known territory, and some territory is new territory. And I think that's where, you know, if you have questions that are still unanswered at this point, they need to somehow be addressed in the retainer, because we know it's gonna be coming up.
I mean, I think that would be in the contract formation and development, but I think getting that in advance from the legislature would be good before we go into an agreement, and then maybe that's not what you were thinking about.
Well, can you tell me exactly what you're asking for direction from the legislature?
On the percentages, there are two questions, I guess. One would be that final decision-making, and maybe use the 05 agreement to look at it, to see what it says, and if you're okay with it being that way. And then the second part would just be, and again, it sounds like something may be out there, on the percentages that we will pay.
So we're not ready yet. We don't
Well,
have all
I
that
think you're ready
answered.
I can't speak for you, but there's
Well,
a
I'm not ready, I can tell
resolution
you
that
that.
authorizes to go forward in a contract. I just don't necessarily wanna take a lot of people's time in negotiating a contract and then coming in, it's not something that you're comfortable with.
Well, this is the first time I'm hearing what the responsibilities of the the guidance you're looking for from the legislature with regards to this.
So, but these are questions that can be answered once we pass this resolution and then move forward to negotiating an agreement, correct?
Yeah.
So none of this will go by without the legislature having input on that agreement, correct?
Sure.
So,
What are you, is that what you want
Yeah, I'm in
direction
agreement
first?
with that, yeah,
Okay.
I think if you have if the resolution goes forth, if we can just continue to get guidance and or direction from the legislature on those two issues, that would be helpful for me before we, enter into a formal contract.
Because I think it has to be done in a timely way. What we don't want to happen is that they end up doing work and it hasn't been authorized, not pointing fingers here, I'm just saying, we don't want to be in a situation where they think that they're authorized to do work, and then we find out about it after the fact, and then they put in all this time, and, there's nothing to,
okay, one more comment from Cindy,
Yeah,
and I'd like to call the
I
question.
just think, according to the resolution, the division has identified, the needs of safety net repayment agreements, Medicaid repayment, but ultimately, the commissioner would be directing the firm on what collections to focus on, correct? Is that
Pretty sure that's what I
correct?
said.
So you'll be giving us
20
regular
minutes ago.
reports on, in monthly meetings, on what they're working on.
What's
and-
been referred and what.
Do you want that wording in the resolution?
Well, I
Can we
think
make
as
it
far
clear in
as passing this resolution today, because I haven't seen any information either, I think I'm comfortable with it, understanding that they can be given work to do or not, depending on what the commissioner needs, so I think I'm okay with it.
Okay,
That's the whole
all in
point.
favor? Any opposed? Okay,
9-zip.
thank you. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Cheryl.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Randy.
What were you saying?
And if anybody ever has questions, I think, I understand you have a process you have to go through. But
It
we're
is
happy,
government.
we're happy at any time to sit down with whoever wants to sit down and tell you what we do, how we do it, and we look forward to possibly working with the county. Thank you.
Thank you.
The
Thanks,
seats
Joe.
weren't that hot today, you're fine.
Have a great trip.
Yeah.
Okay,
I'd like to move 4 and 5 as one,
I'll
please.
second.
okay. Any discussion on these? These came out of the Veterans Committee. This is, they've asked for some support on these bills in Congress. Any questions, comments? Okay, all in favor of the two? Any opposed?
9-zip.
Thank you. Number 6, authorized contract extensions. That's extending all contracts that we, without outside agencies for 90 days.
Jonathan.
Jonathan, second. Happy. Any discussions? All in favor? Opposed?
9-zip.
Thank you. Number 7, reappoint Gene Benson to the Sullivan County Soil and Water Conservation District Board. Motion, Alan, second, Jonathan. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Okay. Gene, you've done a great job on that
Well, I
committee, so
have to
thank you.
I know.
Thank
I know,
you.
that's what
We
I'm
appreciate
putting
it.
abstain.
Number
8-zip with abstainment.
Okay, number 8, reappoint Heather Jackson and Joe Wire as alternate to the Upper Delaware
Move
Scenic
it.
Byway Incorporated. Kathy, Jean, any discussion? Cora?
Yeah. I just would like that when you have your monthly reports back to the, planning committee, because there's so many overlaps between what the byway does, the council does, and the towns and so on, that, I know we get the minutes of what they do, but just to be able to say, we went to this meeting, this happened, so we're all kept abreast of things as it happens.
You want that in the planning committee?
I'm requesting, if you're gonna sit on the board, that we get a report back.
Well, that's fine.
Thank you.
You want it at the committee, or do you want, like, Heather just to prepare and send it to all the boards and the industry?
It's easier if it's presented, than if we have questions, we can ask them right then and there. Thank you.
Okay, all in favor? Opposed?
Nine
Okay.
zip.
Thank you. Number 9, reappoint Tom Maloney and Nancy King to the Public Health Services Professional Advisory Committee. Motion?
Motion.
Jean, second. Alan, any discussion, questions? All in favor? Opposed?
Nine zip.
Okay. I think we'll take public comment now. We will be going into an executive, oh, I'm sorry, we have 2 more. Thank you, appreciate that. We have 2 handout resolutions before you.
Blue wing first.
We'll do the Blue Wing first, okay? Motion
I'll move
for
that,
discussion,
Kathy.
Kathy, second, Jean. Any discussion on this resolution? All in favor? Opposed?
zip.
Okay, thank you. And the last one is to modify the Visitors Association contract. Okay, we have a motion for discussion. Alan, Jonathan. Discussion, Cora?
My understanding is that in the first round with the contract, it was either the county or the Visitors Association that was paid in advance, and then, the county paid in advance, and now we're changing it back to the way it was, because they would otherwise have to take a loan out in order to make their payments.
No, what has happened is the contract, the way it is signed now, there's a committee of the treasurer, the county manager, that decides, and there's one more person in there.
Audit.
An audit, and they decide, as the money comes in, basically, the last quarter. What we're asking to do is go back to the original contract from a few years ago, where they get a quarterly payment at the beginning of each quarter in full, with a reconciliation at the end of the final quarter,
Right.
which would be in March.
So what I said in caucus, because this was before I knew that it was gonna come to a vote, I basically said, I don't think it's good business practice for the county to be ahead of the payments. If there's a way to reconcile that so that we're paying as we go, or that we're neither above or behind, because to me, it sounds like it's either a win-lose or a lose-win, and I'd like to see a win-win, so that we're not in this situation, they're not in this situation, at the end of every contract period. Is there a way to do that, Josh, or is it just?
Well, I think the existing way it's written was an attempt at that, but in practice, it's not really working as I think it was intended. In essence, what will happen with this specific vendor, they'll end up getting their first, if they are awarded the contract, they would get their first quarter payment of 14 before they ever see $1 from the fourth quarter of 13.
That's what I mean.
So it becomes, it was an attempt to correct and make things better, but I didn't think in practice, it's not really working as intended.
And the way it was working before, we tried to fix that. So we haven't fixed the underlying problem, is the message I'm getting.
I think and I think going back to how it was, it ultimately worked. They got to the dollar what they were supposed to get. It just, we pay them and have to make a reconciliation. This way they don't get anything until we know pretty firmly what we're gonna get, and that's not until March or April when the final quarter of the room tax comes in.
So the version that's gonna be signed now is gonna do what?
It would be allowing
Pretty much
November
revert
and
back to
December scheme.
the way it was a year or 2 years ago.
Which was the problem
It was-
we were trying to fix. So we're going back to the original.
Well, actually,
problem.
Cora, just
I just need to be clear.
to clarify, that we went to this part, the contract in this form, because there was an anomaly of a very large payment one year, and it had to be a reconciliation. On a normal basis, the room tax stays fairly steady, and so we can go from a prior year's room tax, break it up into quarters and pay them at the beginning of each quarter, with a small reconciliation at the end of the fourth quarter, which would happen in March.
So that's what we're going back to.
And that's what we'd like to go back, what we're asking to go back to. And conceivably, as we're going forward now, we would only be hopefully looking at increases. So they would actually get a payment, an extra payment at the end of the fourth quarter beyond their fourth quarter payment.
So that means that we are paying in advance. So I
Yes.
just wanna make sure that we're not gonna come back next December at this time and have the same conversation, because, you know, we see these changes happening.
That's true.
And
That's true.
whether, you know, other, room tax entities come online or not. So is this like the final, or are we gonna constantly be adjusting to get back to where we need to be, that the payments and the time period is in tandem?
Could you do?
Well, I think
Am I
this, I
making
mean,
sense?
in practice, this is, I mean, the best of the options that I think that we have. And then if something else comes up, we find a different way to do it that's even better, we'll go to that. But I think this would reflect 13, and then the vendor for 14 would have the similar language that we would enter the contract early in 14.
And the contract is again for 1 year?
Yeah, believe we've always historically done the visitor's contract in 1-year intervals.
I see, okay, so we may be in this position a year from now where we're looking at revising it in a way that works better.
And you're always gonna have an issue because the tax is levied on an off quarter, so it's not a calendar quarter, and it's on a lag, so the vendors don't collect the money for 3 months and pay the county on the 15th to the 20th day of the 4th month. So at the end of the year, you're always gonna have, you're never gonna match up because we don't collect it monthly, so it's not like we can collect it each month and pay it each month. Ira collects it, the big checks come in on December 20th by the time it's reconciled, and then all of December's collections aren't collected until February. So there's
And
always
just for the
gonna be a
record,
timing lag.
part of what the problem is for the Visitors Association, we've tasked them with the job of doing their marketing, and the problem is if they're not getting a payment in the last quarter, they're not able to do the work for the following year, setting up their ads for the next year, the next season.
I
Katie?
would speak in favor of this for that very reason. All the conventions, all the things for us to be in the limelight come May occur now. If they don't have the money to do that, it really stopgates how much they can help in going to exhibits, making books, putting out ads, attending conferences. It really slows down how much they can afford on their own to go out and do, simply because they don't have the money and won't get it until May when all those conferences and things are done.
Well, it's actually, it will be March. There can be payments along the way, but the problem is, and I think that's what Ira wants to talk about. Do you want to mention that? That there actually can be payments?
Yeah, well, that's one thing. What I wanted to say, and I'm happy to let you finish.
No, go ahead.
But I hadn't seen this before, but I did have an opportunity not too long ago to sit with Josh and Angela and go over the current contract, because there is this ongoing annual question about fourth quarter payments. In reading that contract, which is, I think Sam wrote, and it's pretty complex as far as, you know, you can read the contract and figure out what it's directed at, which is protecting that we don't make an overpayment in the fourth quarter and then have to go and recoup it because we didn't get the revenue that we anticipated. So it provides for a process where the three of us can get together and try, based on estimates, to give them regular payments as they're coming in, based on what we see coming in, what we know are coming in. Like this year, I think this is coming up because we were behind, as you remember my report last week, where I think it was $81,000 behind last year, but it was because we were waiting for somebody, one of our bigger facilities filed a report but didn't give us a check, but we anticipated it. So in anticipation of that and what we normally get in the month of November and December, we could tell that we were able to give them the same kind of money we gave them last year, because that's where we anticipate being. So there is that. What I did have my hand up though, because having not seen this before, when I sitting here reading it, I first read it to say, substituting a new paragraph B which authorizes fourth quarter payments in amounts based on best estimates of the 2013 room tax revenue. Well, that's what we have now. So if you're changing it to that, it's not a change. No, it is a change. Because that's exactly what we do, that's exactly what we do now, but if you're changing it to what I hear Cora saying, or what you're saying, which is no, it's gonna be a certain, set amount based on the other quarters, that's not in here and it ought to be.
No, what happened is, present contract, in order to avoid the problem of overpaying in the fourth quarter, is based on actual receipts. This came up, Angela came to see me when Ira reported to Angela that he could not give her a number for, what was it, October?
The
November?
contract allows us to pay October, but November and December is on hold until we could come up, we know it's actually
Actual
collected.
receipts, and because of that one big payment that wasn't in, we couldn't make any payment at all. There was no actual receipt. So this would, in effect, go back to best estimates of all. Is there a number in that resolution, Ira?
Yeah, this one,
Okay. We'd even come up with a number. You would come up with it, Angela.
I think the original contract, correct me if I'm wrong, has a number based on past history, and that's how we come up with the quarterly amounts now.
Okay, thanks, Ira. Well, this will allow a
550,
payment to
isn't
be made this quarter, which would not have otherwise been able to be made.
if the current agreement says, based on actual receipts, the current practice has been to, in order to accommodate the Visitor Association and make sure they get the money they need, we've been going on estimates. So if this changes the language from receipts to estimates, which is what we've been doing anyway,
It conforms to what you've been doing.
that I would certainly have no problem with that.
Okay. All in favor? Opposed?
9-zip.
Okay. We will be going into an executive session for collective negotiations and a personnel matter, but before we do that, I'd like to open the floor to public comment. Okay, motion to go into executive. Jonathan, second. Alan. All in favor? Okay, thank you, everybody.